The guest cottage was cold, smelling faintly of cedar and unused linens, a sharp contrast to the warmth and laughter radiating from the main house just 50 yards away. I sat in the darkness of the small kitchenette, listening to the muffled bass of the string quartet I had hired, the music drifting across the snow-covered lawn like a ghost of the life I used to lead. Vanessa had banished me here with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, telling me to rest while she entertained the city's elite in the home my wife and I had built brick by brick. She thought she had hidden an embarrassing old man away, clearing the stage for her to shine as the new matriarch of the Thorne dynasty. She believed that by removing me from the head table, she had removed my influence, assuming that my silence was a symptom of senility rather than a discipline of self-control. I watched through the frosted window pane as shadows danced in the ballroom, silhouettes of guests enjoying the vintage champagne that was currently charged to my personal account. I placed my phone on the small wooden table in front of me, the screen glowing bright in the dim room. It was 7:45 p.m. The appetizers, beluga caviar and truffle-infused tartlets, Vanessa's specific and exorbitant demand, were scheduled to be served at exactly 8 p.m. I poured myself a glass of tap water, staring at the digital clock on the microwave, watching the minutes tick away with the rhythmic precision of a metronome. My hands were steady. There was no shaking, no confusion, none of the frailty Vanessa claimed to see in me. My late wife, Clara, had always told me that anger was a waste of energy, that true power lay in timing and leverage. "Don't swing the hammer until you know exactly where the beam is weak, Elias," she would say, tapping my temple with her finger. Vanessa had swung her hammer prematurely, cracking the foundation of our family without realizing she was standing directly beneath the falling debris. At 7:55 p.m., I unlocked my phone and opened the banking application that controlled the estate's primary liquidity. For the last 3 years, since my son Julian had allowed Vanessa to take over the day-to-day aesthetics of our lives, I had quietly maintained a separate, overriding authorization protocol on all our accounts. They saw the credit cards in their wallets as magic wands. They didn't understand that I was the magician keeping the illusion alive. I scrolled through the pending transactions, seeing the massive hold for the catering company, the lighting crew, the valet service, and the private security firm guarding the gates. It was a sum of money that could have renovated the local library, all spent on a single night to stroke the ego of a woman who had just treated me like a stray dog. I didn't feel malicious as I looked at the "Freeze all assets" button. I felt efficient. I felt like an architect spotting a structural flaw that threatened the integrity of the building and deciding, finally, to condemn the structure. I pressed the button. The screen flashed a confirmation, and then a second notification popped up. Fraud alert triggered. All linked cards suspended. I wasn't done. I navigated to my contacts and dialed the number for Marcus, the owner of the catering company. We had gone to school together. He was a man of principle who had only taken this job as a favor to me, despite Vanessa's rude demands during the tasting sessions. He answered on the second ring, his voice hushed, likely standing just outside the kitchen doors. "Elias? Is everything all right? I didn't see you at the main table." "I'm not at the table, Marcus," I said, my voice calm, stripping away any emotion that might make me sound unhinged. "I have been removed from the premises by the hostess. I am currently in the guest cottage." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I let the weight of the information settle before delivering the instruction that would bring the evening to a grinding halt. Since the host is no longer present, and the funding for this event is tied strictly to my authorization, I am officially canceling the contract effective immediately. "You are to stop service." "Elias," Marcus whispered, the shock evident in his tone. "The servers are literally lining up with the trays. The appetizers are about to go out." If I pull the plug now. Then pull it, I interrupted gently. Pack up the food. Tell your staff to leave. If Vanessa asks, tell her the payment has been declined and the client has terminated the event. Do not negotiate. Do not accept a secondary card. She doesn't have one that works anymore. I could hear the clatter of silverware in the background, the hum of a party in full swing, completely unaware that its lifeline had just been severed. I will pay your team for the full night, Marcus, plus a generous tip for the inconvenience. But not a single crumb is to be served to that room. Do you understand? I understand, Marcus said, his voice hardening with a loyalty that money couldn't buy. I never liked how she spoke to you, Elias. Consider it done. I hung up the phone and turned my gaze back to the window. The transformation was not immediate, but it was inevitable. At 8:05 p.m., the flow of waiters that should have been flooding the ballroom suddenly reversed. I saw confusion ripple through the crowd near the kitchen doors. A few guests turned their heads, looking for the food that had been promised. Vanessa, resplendent in a silver gown that shimmered under the chandelier light, was holding court near the center of the room, laughing at something a banker's wife had said. She looked triumphant, the queen of a castle she hadn't paid for, unaware that the drawbridge was being raised and the moat was filling with water. Then, the lights flickered. I hadn't cut the power, that would be dangerous, but I had accessed the smart home interface Clara and I had installed 5 years ago. I dimmed the ballroom chandeliers to 10%, casting the room into a sudden, murky twilight. The music faltered as the musicians struggled to read their sheet music. The laughter died down, replaced by a murmur of confusion. I saw Vanessa stiffen. She gestured wildly to a passing server, likely demanding to know why the lights were dim and where the food was. The server stopped, shook his head, and walked away. The disrespect she had shown me was now being mirrored back to her by the very staff she had treated like furniture. It was fascinating to watch the facade crumble from a distance. The panic in her movements was visible even from 50 yards away. She grabbed Julian's arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket, pointing at the kitchen, then at the chandelier, then at her phone. She was trying to call someone, probably me, or perhaps the bank. My phone remained silent on the table. I had blocked her number 5 minutes ago. I wasn't hiding from her wrath. I was letting her stew in the juice of her own consequences. She had wanted me invisible. Fine. I was now the invisible hand dismantling her perfect night. A moment later, the side door of the main house opened, and Marcus stepped out, followed by a stream of catering staff carrying crates of food back to the vans. The guests were now standing awkwardly, empty wine glasses in hand, as the realization set in that the party was dissolving around them. Vanessa rushed toward Marcus, blocking his path. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the body language. She was screaming. She was demanding. She was pointing at the house, at the guests, at the sky. Marcus simply stood there, a stone in the river of her hysteria, shook his head once, and signaled for his team to keep moving. I took a sip of water. It was cool and refreshing. Inside the cottage, it was quiet, peaceful. But inside the main house, the architecture of Vanessa's social standing was collapsing. She had spent years building a reputation based on appearances, on the assumption that the Thorn money was an endless tap she could turn on and off at will. She had forgotten the most basic rule of construction: never insult the man who holds the blueprints. The party was over, but the lesson had just begun. The last limousine crunched down the gravel driveway at 8:45 p.m., its red taillights disappearing into the snowy Vermont night like the fading embers of a dying fire. The silence that followed was heavy, pressing against the glass of the guest cottage. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the suffocating quiet of a battlefield after the cannons have stopped firing. I sat in the wingback chair, my hands resting on my knees, watching the snow fall. It covered the tire tracks, smoothing over the chaotic exodus of the city's elite, erasing the evidence of Vanessa's disaster one flake at a time. Nature has a way of resetting the stage, of reminding us that our petty dramas are temporary, but the earth is permanent. I knew they were coming. I could see the lights in the main house blazing, not the soft, ambient lighting of a home, but the harsh, erratic switching of rooms being searched, of anger pacing back and forth. I checked my watch. 9 p.m. Right on schedule. The door to the cottage didn't open, it exploded inward. It slammed against the wall with enough force to crack the plaster, a violence that made the framed photo of Clara on the mantel rattle. Vanessa stood in a doorway, her silver gown now looking like a costume from a canceled play, her mascara smudged slightly under her left eye. Julian stood behind her, looking like a man who was trying to make himself small enough to disappear into the woodwork. He wouldn't look at me. He stared at his expensive Italian loafers, the ones I had bought him for his birthday last year. "You senile, vindictive old bastard," Vanessa screamed. Her voice wasn't just loud, it was shrill, vibrating with a panic she was trying desperately to convert into rage. She marched into the room, bringing the cold air with her. "Do you have any idea what you just did? Do you have any concept of the damage you caused tonight?" I didn't stand up. I didn't raise my voice. I simply picked up the glass of water I had been nursing and took a slow, deliberate sip. "I believe I saved myself $60,000, Vanessa. And I believe I saved the family name from the hypocrisy of hosting a celebration of unity while the patriarch is banished to the shed." "Banished?" She scoffed, throwing her hands up. "We were protecting you. You were confused earlier. You were wandering around looking frail. I did this for your dignity, Elias. And you repay us by humiliating me in front of the mayor? In front of the board of directors?" She was pacing now, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood floor. "Marcus told me. He said you called him. He said you terminated the contract. You cut off my legs in the middle of the most important night of my career." "Your career?" I asked softly, tilting my head. Strange. I was under the impression that this was a family solstice party. "When did it become a networking event for your design firm?" She froze, her eyes narrowing into slits. "Everything is about the firm, Elias. That's how we keep this roof over your head. That's how we pay for your medical bills, your—" "Stop," I said. The word was quiet, but it had the density of lead. I looked at Julian. "My medical bills are covered by the insurance policy I purchased in 1985. The roof over my head was paid for in full 20 years ago. And the firm is a vanity project that hasn't turned a profit in 3 quarters. I read the statements, Julian. Julian flinched. He finally looked up, his face pale and sweaty. "Dad, please. You didn't have to do it like this. We could have talked about it tomorrow." Vanessa was crying in the pantry. "You destroyed her. She destroyed herself when she mistook my kindness for blindness," I replied. "You told me I was too confused to sit at the table. So, I made a decision. A confused man shouldn't be in charge of authorizing a $60,000 catering bill. A frail old man shouldn't be burdened with the stress of hosting. So, I removed the burden. I would think you'd be thanking me for prioritizing my health, just as you insisted I do." Vanessa let out a guttural scream of frustration, grabbing a ceramic vase from the side table and hurling it at the floor. It shattered into a dozen pieces, blue and white pottery that Clara had brought back from our trip to Portugal. I looked at the shards, feeling a sharp pain in my chest, but I kept my face impassive. It was just an object. Clara was gone, the memory remained. Vanessa could break the clay, but she couldn't break the history. "You think you're clever," Vanessa hissed, stepping over the debris, invading my personal space. She leaned down, her face inches from mine, smelling of expensive perfume and stale wine. "You think because you built this house, you own us. You're done, Elias." This was the last straw. I'm not going to let a bitter old man ruin my future. She straightened up, smoothing her dress with trembling hands, a cold, calculated look replacing the hysteria. "Tomorrow morning, I'm calling Dr. Aris. We're going to have a competency hearing. If you're confused enough to sabotage a family event, then clearly you're not competent to manage the estate. We'll get power of attorney, Elias. And once we have it, you won't just be in the guest cottage. You'll be in a facility where you can stare at the wall and save all the money you want." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the greed that had hollowed her out, the insecurity that drove her to consume everything around her to fill the void. "Is that a threat, Vanessa?" "It's a promise," she spat. "Julian agrees. Don't you, Julian?" Julian looked between us, his wife, the tyrant, and his father, the architect. He swallowed hard, then nodded weakly. It might be for the best, Dad. You're getting unpredictable. We just want you to be safe." The betrayal didn't sting as much as I expected. It was more of a dull ache, like an old injury acting up in the rain. They were going to try to declare me incompetent. They were going to try to steal the very mind that had designed skyscrapers and bridges. "Get out," I said. "We're leaving," Vanessa sneered. "Enjoy the cottage. It might be the last night you spend on the property." They turned and left, leaving the door wide open to the winter wind. I didn't get up to close it immediately. Instead, I looked toward the staircase of the cottage. The shadows shifted, and a small figure in flannel pajamas stepped down from the loft. It was Mia, my 12-year-old granddaughter. She had been hiding there the whole time, likely sneaking out of the main house when the shouting started. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and a strange, fierce understanding. She held a small, battered notebook in her hands, one of Clara's old sketching journals I had given her. "Grandpa," she whispered, "are they really going to send you away?" I stood up then, my joints popping, and walked over to close the door. I locked it, sliding the heavy bolt into place. Then I turned to the only person in this family who still had Clara's spirit. "No, Mia," I said, crouching down so I was eye level with her. "They aren't going to send me anywhere. They just made a very big mistake. They told the architect they planned to demolish the building while he's still inside." Mia looked at the broken vase on the floor, then back at me. "Mom is really mad. She said she's going to take your checkbook." "She can try," I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out a small, encrypted USB drive. "But she doesn't know where the real accounts are. And she doesn't know that Grandma Clara left us a map." I walked over to the kitchenette and picked up the broom. "Help me clean this up, sweetie. We have a lot of work to do before the sun comes up. If they want a war over my competency, I'll give them a demonstration of my intellect." As we swept up the shards of the Portuguese vase, I felt a shift in the atmosphere. The grief was still there, heavy and constant, but it had hardened into something useful. Resolve. Vanessa wanted a competency hearing. Fine. I would give her one. But she had forgotten that in a court of law, evidence is everything. And while she had been busy picking out appetizers, I had been busy documenting every transaction, every insult, and every threat for the last 3 years. The foundation was cracked, yes. But the demolition charges were already set. And tomorrow, I was going to hand her the detonator. The hours between midnight and dawn are where the truth lives. While the rest of the world sleeps under the comfortable blanket of ignorance, the insomniacs and the grieving sit awake, staring at the raw mechanics of their lives. I sat at the small kitchenette table in the guest cottage, the only light coming from the focused beam of a drafting lamp. Mia was asleep on the pull-out sofa, wrapped in a quilt that smelled of lavender and old memories. Watching her chest rise and fall, I felt a surge of protectiveness so fierce it almost brought tears to my eyes. She was the only innocent thing left in this wreckage, a small flower growing in a demolition zone. Vanessa and Julian were willing to burn down the entire family forest just to sell the timber, and they didn't care if Mia got scorched in the process. I opened the leather-bound journal that Clara had written 3 months before she passed. Her handwriting was shaky, the ink trailing off where her strength had failed her, but her mind had remained diamond-sharp until the very end. I turned to the page marked with a yellow sticky note, Protocol V. I ran my finger over the words. Elias, she had written, Vanessa loves things, not people. She treats the family like furniture, useful when stylish, disposable when worn. If the day comes when she tries to move you into storage, do not argue. Just show her the deed to the warehouse. Clara had always been the visionary. I was just the builder who executed her designs. She had foreseen this moment, the moment when greed would outweigh gratitude, and she had insisted we bury legal landmines deep within the estate's paperwork. At 4 a.m., I began to assemble my defense. Vanessa's threat to declare me incompetent was not an idle one. In the state of Vermont, if she could find a doctor willing to testify that my confusion at the party was a sign of dementia, and if she could convince a judge that I was a danger to the estate's finances, she could be granted emergency guardianship. It was a terrifyingly easy process if the victim was passive. But I was not passive. I was methodical. I logged into my encrypted cloud server and pulled up the Thorne Family Irrevocable Trust documents from 1998. Vanessa believed the house was destined to be Julian's. She believed my bank accounts were simply waiting to be inherited. She didn't know that the entire estate was locked inside a trust where I was the sole trustee, and, crucially, Julian had been removed as a successor trustee 5 years ago after he borrowed $10,000 without asking. I printed 3 specific pages. The first was the deed to the property, which explicitly stated that the guest cottage was the primary residence for tax purposes, a legal technicality I had arranged years ago to lower our property taxes. By banishing me here, Vanessa had accidentally sent me to the command center. The second was a medical directive signed by my primary care physician just last week during a routine physical, certifying my cognitive health as excellent for his age. The third was a bank statement showing the $60,000 transfer for the party, highlighting that it was a gift, not an obligation. A gift can be revoked. A contract can be canceled. I wasn't confused. I was a consumer exercising his right to stop payment on defective service. By the time the sun began to bleed through the tree line, painting the snow in shades of violet and gray, I was showered, shaved, and dressed in my best charcoal suit. I looked at myself in the small bathroom mirror. The eyes staring back were tired, yes, rimmed with the red of sleeplessness, but they were steady. I didn't look like a frail old man. I looked like a CEO preparing for a hostile takeover. I packed the documents into my briefcase, along with Clara's journal and the USB drive. I woke Mia gently. "It's time, sweetheart," I whispered. "I need you to go back to the main house before they wake up. Act like you were in your room all night. Can you do that for me?" Mia rubbed her eyes, nodding solemnly. "Are you going to run away, Grandpa?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No," I said, smoothing her hair. "I'm going to town. I have a breakfast meeting with a lawyer. But I need them to think I'm still in here, cowering in fear. I need them to think they've won." I watched her run across the snowy lawn, her small footprints the only disturbance in the pristine white. Once she was safely inside, I waited another hour. At 7:30 a.m., I saw the familiar black sedan of Dr. Eris pull into the driveway. Vanessa wasn't wasting time. She had called in her favor. Dr. Eris was a society doctor, the kind who prescribed pills to bored housewives and signed whatever forms were put in front of him for a fee. They were coming to ambush me. They expected to find me in pajamas, disoriented, surrounded by the mess of my breakdown. I slipped out the back door of the cottage, moving through the dense pine grove that bordered the property. I knew every inch of this land. I had graded the soil myself 40 years ago. I reached the garage where I kept my vintage Jaguar, a car Vanessa hated because it was noisy and smelled of gasoline. I rolled it out of the detached garage in neutral, letting gravity take it down the driveway until I was past the gate. I started the engine. It roared to life, a deep, throaty growl that felt like a battle cry. As I drove away, I saw Dr. Eris and Vanessa knocking aggressively on the cottage door. Let them knock. Let them break it down. They were looking for a ghost. I drove straight to the office of Heavy Oak and Old Books, the office of Benjamin Sterling, the family attorney who had helped Clara and me write the trust. He was 80 years old, deaf in one ear, and sharper than a guillotine blade. When I walked in, he didn't ask why I was there. He simply poured 2 cups of black coffee and opened a fresh legal pad. "She triggered the clause?" Benjamin asked, his voice rasping like sandpaper. "She threatened the competency hearing," I replied, placing the USB drive on his desk. "She brought Eris to the house this morning. They want guardianship, Ben. They want the checkbook." Benjamin chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Dr. Eris couldn't diagnose a cold if you sneezed on him. But it's aggressive. She's desperate. What do you want to do, Elias? We can file a restraining order. We can evict them. The house is in the trust. You have the power to kick them out by noon." I took a sip of the bitter coffee, thinking of Mia. Thinking of Julian, who was too weak to stand up to his wife but was still my son. No eviction. Not yet. If I kick them out now, Julian will just follow her, and I'll lose him forever. I need to break her hold on him. I need to expose her so completely that even my blind son has to see the truth. I leaned forward. I want to trigger the insolvency audit. I want to freeze the accounts for an internal investigation. If she claims I'm incompetent, I claim the accounts have been compromised by fraud. Let's see who the bank believes, the trustee with a perfect credit score, or the daughter-in-law with maxed-out credit cards. Benjamin smiled, showing teeth stained by years of cigars. The nuclear option. I like it. It freezes everything. No grocery money, no gas money, no shopping sprees. They'll be living on whatever cash is in their pockets. Do it, I said. And one more thing. I want you to hire a forensic accountant. I want to know where every penny of the maintenance budget has gone for the last 3 years. Because I have a feeling the new roof I paid for was actually a down payment on that Mercedes she drives. As Benjamin picked up the phone to make the call that would suffocate Vanessa's lifestyle, I sat back in the leather chair and closed my eyes. I wasn't safe yet. The war had just moved from the battlefield to the courtroom. But as I sat there, I felt Clara's presence beside me, warm and reassuring. We were building a trap, and Vanessa had just walked right into the center of it. The coffee in Benjamin's office was stale, but it tasted like victory. I sat in the high-backed leather chair, watching the clock on the wall tick toward noon. It had been 4 hours since we initiated the insolvency audit, a nuclear auction in trust law that effectively treats the estate as a crime scene until every penny is accounted for. I didn't need to be at the house to know what was happening. I knew the rhythm of Vanessa's spending habits better than I knew my own heartbeat. By 11 a.m., she usually made her rounds: the organic market, the Pilates studio, the florist for the fresh lilies she insisted on having in the foyer. By 11:15 a.m., the first card would have been declined. By 11:30 a.m., the panic would have set in. My phone, which had been silent on the desk, suddenly lit up. It was Julian. I let it ring 3 times, composing myself, breathing in the scent of old paper and dust that filled the law office. I wasn't answering as a father, I was answering as a trustee. I swiped the green icon and put the phone on speaker, allowing Benjamin to hear the conversation. He leaned back, steepling his fingers, his eyes gleaming with professional curiosity. "Dad, where are you?" Julian's voice was breathless, high-pitched. In the background, I could hear the distinct sound of Vanessa's voice, sharp and frantic, like a circular saw hitting a nail. "We've been looking everywhere. The cottage was empty. The garage is empty. And, Dad, the cards aren't working. Vanessa is at the dealership. She was trying to pick up the loaner car, and they cut up her Amex right in front of her. What is going on?" "Hello, Julian," I said, my voice level, stripping away any hint of the anger that churned in my gut. "I am currently with my attorney. We are reviewing the estate's security protocols." "Security protocols?" Vanessa's voice suddenly overpowered Julian's. She must have snatched the phone from his hand. "Elias, stop playing games. You froze the accounts. Do you know how humiliating it is to have a card declined for a $5 latte? Turn them back on right now, or I swear to God, when Dr. Aris signs those papers, I will put you in a home so cheap the nurses won't even speak English." "That is precisely why the accounts are frozen, Vanessa," I replied, glancing at Benjamin, who suppressed a dark chuckle. "You and Julian raised serious concerns about my cognitive abilities. You claimed I was confused, frail, and prone to irrational behavior. If the primary trustee is mentally compromised, as you suggest, then the estate is vulnerable to fraud. My attorney advised an immediate freeze of all assets to protect the family fortune from my confusion. We can't have a senile old man managing millions, can we?" There was a silence on the other end so profound I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head. She had built her trap, but she hadn't realized that the trapdoor opened both ways. She wanted me incompetent so she could take control. Instead, her claim of incompetence had triggered an automatic lockdown. You did this on purpose," she hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You're not confused. You're spiteful." "I am simply following the logic you presented," I said. "The audit will take approximately 30 days. During that time, the trust will issue a basic stipend for groceries and utilities. No discretionary spending. No renovations. No galas. And certainly no legal fees for competency hearings. If you want to fight me, Vanessa, you'll have to do it with your own money. Oh, wait. You don't have any. I hung up before she could respond. My hand was shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally cutting the strings. For 3 years, I had been the puppet, dancing to their tune to keep the peace, to keep access to my granddaughter, to honor Clara's wish for family unity. But there is no unity with a parasite, there is only the slow death of the host. Benjamin slid a folder across the desk. The forensic accountant just emailed the preliminary findings, he said, his tone shifting from amused to serious. Elias, we knew she was spending a lot. But we didn't know how she was doing it. This isn't just lifestyle creep. This is embezzlement. I opened the folder. The pages were covered in spreadsheets, red lines highlighting a series of transactions to a company called Vantage Aesthetics LLC. The amounts were staggering, $15,000 here, $22,000 there, all billed as consulting fees or sourcing retainers. I've never heard of Vantage Aesthetics, I murmured, scanning the dates. The payments went back 2 years. Is it a supplier? It's a shell, Benjamin said, tapping the paper. Registered to a P.O. box in Delaware. The sole signatory is one V. Thorne. She's been billing the estate for her own consulting services on top of the allowance you already give her. She's essentially paying herself to shop. And look at this. He pointed to a transaction from last month. $45,000 for historic preservation materials. Elias, did you have any preservation work done on the West Wing? No, I said, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. The West Wing has been closed off for winter. We haven't touched it. Exactly, Benjamin said. She pocketed the money. That's grand larceny. That's fraud. If we take this to the police, she doesn't just lose the house. She goes to prison. I stared at the numbers. This was the smoking gun. Clara had always suspected Vanessa was dishonest, but she thought it was a moral dishonesty, a shallow character. She hadn't realized it was criminal. Vanessa wasn't just a gold digger, she was a thief who had been dismantling our legacy brick by brick while smiling at the dinner table. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message. It was from Mia. Grandpa. Mom is tearing the office apart. She's looking for the blue binder. She's screaming at Dad to find the access codes. I'm scared. Please come home. The protectiveness I felt earlier flared into a white-hot resolve. They were scaring Mia. They were turning my home into a war zone. I closed the folder and looked at Benjamin. I'm not going to the police yet, I said, standing up and buttoning my jacket. Prison is too easy. She'll play the victim. She'll say I authorized it in a moment of lucidity and then forgot. No. I need a confession. I need Julian to see it with his own eyes. You're going back there? Benjamin asked, concerned. Elias, she's volatile. It's my house, Ben, I said, picking up the briefcase containing the evidence of her crimes. And it's time the architect returned to the job site. She wants a competency hearing. I'll give her a competency hearing. But the only thing being judged will be her integrity. I walked out of the office and into the cold afternoon air. The drive back to the estate felt different than the drive away. I wasn't escaping anymore. I was invading. The sun was setting, casting long, sharp shadows across the snow, turning the world into a high-contrast blueprint of black and white. I drove the Jaguar fast, the engine growling, mirroring the anger that I had suppressed for so long. When I pulled up to the gate, I saw Julian standing in the driveway, shivering in his suit, pacing back and forth. He looked lost, a man whose entire world was defined by the women in his life, first his mother, then his wife. He had traded a nurturer for a predator and hadn't realized it until the teeth were already in his neck. I stopped the car and rolled down the window. "Get in, Julian," I commanded. "Dad," he stammered, his teeth chattering. She's out of control. She says you stole her money. Get in." He obeyed, sliding into the passenger seat like a chastised child. As we drove up the winding path to the main house, I handed him the folder. "Read it," I said. "Don't speak. Just read." By the time we reached the front steps, Julian was pale, his eyes wide with a horror that had nothing to do with the cold. "Dad, this says she stole nearly $500,000. This says Vantage Aesthetics is her." "It is," I said, turning off the engine. The silence of the car was heavy. "Now, we are going inside. And you have a choice to make, Julian. You can stand beside the thief who has been robbing your inheritance and abusing your father, or you can stand beside me. But you cannot stand in the middle anymore." I opened the door and stepped out. The front door of the lodge was open. I could hear glass breaking inside. Vanessa was throwing a tantrum. I adjusted my cuffs, took a deep breath of the freezing air, and walked toward the sound of the destruction, ready to bring the roof down on her head. The foyer of the Thorn Lodge, usually a sanctuary of polished mahogany and silent history, looked like the aftermath of a natural disaster. A crystal vase, one that had held fresh lilies only that morning, lay in shattered shards near the coat rack, the water soaking into the antique Persian rug. The air smelled of expensive perfume mixed with the metallic tang of adrenaline. Vanessa was standing at the top of the grand staircase, her phone in one hand and a glass of wine in the other. Her hair, usually lacquered into a helmet of perfection, was loose and wild. She looked down at us, her eyes locking onto mine with a hatred so pure it felt almost physical. She didn't see a father-in-law, she saw an obstacle, a glitch in her software that refused to be deleted. "You have some nerve coming back here," she screamed, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. She descended the stairs, not with grace, but with the heavy, stomping gait of a predator that has been cornered. "I have been on the phone with the bank for 3 hours, Elias. 3 hours. They say the accounts are flagged for suspicious activity initiated by the trustee. That's you. You did this. You froze me out of my own life." She reached the bottom step and pointed a manicured finger at my chest. "Fix it. Right now. Or I swear to God, when Dr. Eris comes back with the sheriff, I will make sure you spend the rest of your life in a state-run facility wearing a diaper." I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I stood my ground, feeling the solid oak floor beneath my feet, the floor my father had laid, the floor I had taught Julian to walk on. Beside me, Julian was trembling. He held the folder I had given him against his chest like a shield, his knuckles white. He was looking at his wife, really looking at her, perhaps for the first time in years. He wasn't seeing the glamour or the status she promised. He was seeing the desperation of a thief caught in the beam of a flashlight. "The accounts are not frozen because of spite, Vanessa," I said, my voice low and steady, cutting through her hysteria like a scalpel. "They are frozen because of a mandatory fraud investigation. It seems the bank's algorithm flagged a series of irregularities. Large sums of money moving to a shell company. Hundreds of thousands of dollars siphoned off under the guise of maintenance and design. Vanessa froze. The color drained from her face, leaving her makeup standing out like a mask on a corpse. She lowered her hands slowly. I don't know what you're talking about. You're confused again. This is exactly why we need the hearing. You're imagining things. I am not imagining Vantage Aesthetics LLC, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a structure losing its load-bearing wall. Vanessa's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted to Julian, then back to me, assessing the damage, calculating her next move. She was a survivor, I'll give her that. She was a cockroach in a silk dress, always looking for the nearest crack to scurry into. Julian, she said, her voice suddenly soft, dripping with a poisonous sweetness. She took a step toward him, reaching out a hand. Baby, listen to me. Your father is sick. He's making things up. He's trying to drive a wedge between us because he's jealous. He's lonely and bitter, and he hates that we're happy. Tell him to stop. Tell him to unlock the card so we can get him the help he needs. Julian looked at her hand, then at the folder in his arms. He took a shallow breath. I saw the invoices, Vanessa. What invoices? She snapped, the sweetness evaporating instantly. Whatever he showed you is fake. He probably forged them. He's an architect, Julian, he knows how to draft things. He didn't draft the bank records, Julian said, his voice cracking. He opened the folder, his hands shaking so hard the papers rattled. He pulled out the summary sheet the forensic accountant had prepared. Vantage Aesthetics. Registered to a P.O. box in Delaware. Signatory, Vanessa Thorne. Starting 2 months after we moved in. You've been billing us for consulting. For materials we never bought. He looked up, tears welling in his eyes. I defended you. When Dad said you were spending too much, I told him you were investing in the property. I fought my own father for you. And you were stealing from us the whole time. It wasn't stealing. Vanessa shrieked, abandoning the denial and pivoting to justification. It was compensation. Do you have any idea how hard I worked to keep this dump looking presentable? I manage the staff, I plan the parties, I deal with the contractors. I deserve a salary, Julian. I deserve to be paid for my time. If I were an outside firm, I would charge double. You charged $45,000 for historic preservation on a wing of the house that has been locked for 6 months, I interjected calmly. That isn't compensation, Vanessa. That is grand larceny. And in the state of Vermont, the theft of assets over $10,000 from a protected person, which, ironically, you claim I am, carries a mandatory prison sentence. Vanessa looked at me with pure venom. You trapped me. You let me spend it. You watched me do it and you said nothing. I was gathering the blueprints, I replied. Clara always told me to measure twice and cut once. I wanted to make sure the cut was clean. She laughed then, a harsh, jagged sound. Clara. Always Clara. The ghost in the attic. You're both pathetic. You think you can scare me with prison. I'm the mother of your grandchild. You send me to jail, you traumatize Mia. Is that what you want? You want to destroy that little girl's life just to prove a point. Mia is already traumatized, a small voice said from the top of the stairs. We all looked up. Mia was standing there, holding the banister with one hand and Clara's journal in the other. She looked small, but her chin was set in a line of defiance that was identical to her grandmother's. "I heard you, Mom. I heard you on the phone with Dr. Eris. You told him Grandpa was losing his mind and that you needed to put him away so we could sell the land to developers." Vanessa's face twisted. "Mia, go to your room. This is adult business." "No," Mia said, walking down the stairs, passing her mother without looking at her, and coming to stand beside me. She took my hand. Her grip was tight, trembling, but she didn't let go. "I don't want to live with a liar. Grandpa isn't sick. You are." The room seemed to shrink around Vanessa. Her husband held the evidence of her crime. Her daughter held the hand of her enemy. Her financial lifeline was severed. The facade she had spent years constructing, the image of the perfect wife, the high society hostess, the devoted mother, was lying in shards on the floor with the broken base. I checked my watch. "It is now 5:15 p.m., I said. "I have not called the police yet. Benjamin, my attorney, has drafted a separation agreement and a confession of judgment. If you sign it, you admit to the debt, you agree to a payment plan, and you vacate this property immediately. We will handle this as a civil matter to spare Mia the sight of her mother in handcuffs." I took a step closer to her. "But if you are still in this house at 6 p.m., or if you ever threaten my competency again, I will hand that folder to the district attorney. And I promise you, Vanessa, the cells in the county jail are not designed by an interior decorator." Vanessa looked at Julian, waiting for him to save her, waiting for the passive man she had married to fold as he always did. "Julian, are you going to let him do this to me? To us?" Julian looked at the woman who had isolated him from his father, who had turned his daughter against him, and who had viewed his inheritance as a checking account. He closed the folder. "I think you should start packing, Vanessa. You have 45 minutes." The heavy oak door clicked shut, a sound that echoed through the foyer like a gavel striking a judge's bench. It was 6:02 p.m. Vanessa was gone. Her car, a sleek black SUV that she had insisted the company lease for, Client Image, had skidded down the driveway moments earlier, packed to the roof with designer clothes and the bitterness of a woman who had gambled everything on a bluff and lost. She hadn't left quietly. She had screamed threats about lawyers, about press releases, about how she would paint me as a senile tyrant to every socialite in Vermont. But as her taillights disappeared around the bend of the pines, the house exhaled. The tension that had vibrated in the walls for 3 years, the fear of her moods, the walking on eggshells, the constant demand for more, evaporated, leaving behind a silence that was profound and heavy. Julian sat on the bottom step of the grand staircase, his head in his hands. He looked like a man who had survived a shipwreck only to realize he was stranded on a desert island. He was still holding the folder of financial crimes, the paper damp where his sweating hands had gripped it. I didn't rush to comfort him. Clara had always taught me that pain is a necessary part of the healing process. You cannot set a broken bone without hurting the patient first. Julian needed to feel the weight of his negligence. He needed to understand that his passivity had been the soil in which Vanessa's greed had flourished. I walked past him, my footsteps steady on the hardwood, and went to the front door to throw the deadbolt. It was a symbolic gesture, locking out the chaos, reclaiming the sanctuary. "She's going to destroy me," Julian whispered, his voice muffled by his palms. "She knows everyone, Dad. She'll tell them I'm abusive. She'll tell them we stole her money. My reputation, the firm." "Your reputation was already being destroyed, Julian," I said, turning to face him. I kept my voice calm, the voice of an architect assessing structural damage. Every time you let her speak to me like a dog, you lost respect. Every time you let her spend money we didn't have, you lost credibility. A man who cannot govern his own house cannot be trusted to build others. I walked over to the side table where the broken vase still lay. I knelt down and began to pick up the larger shards. She can talk all she wants. But we have the bank records. We have the confession she refused to sign but effectively admitted to by fleeing. And we have the truth. Truth is a slow-setting concrete, son. It takes time to harden, but once it does, it supports everything. Mia appeared from the hallway leading to the kitchen. She was holding a broom and a dustpan, her small face pale but determined. She didn't say a word. She just knelt beside me and started sweeping up the ceramic dust. It broke my heart to see her so capable in a crisis. A 12-year-old shouldn't know how to clean up the wreckage of her parents' marriage. But she was Clara's granddaughter. Resilience was in her DNA. I watched her work, her movements efficient, and I realized that while Julian had been blind, Mia had been watching. She had been the silent witness to the theft of our joy. "Are you hungry?" I asked her softly. She nodded. "But there's no food. The caterers took everything back." "Not everything," I said, standing up and dusting off my knees. "I believe there is a stash of emergency soup and grilled cheese ingredients in the pantry. The kind of food real people eat." We retreated to the kitchen, the heart of the home that Vanessa had turned into a sterile showroom of marble and stainless steel. It felt cold and used. I took out a cast iron skillet, one of the few old things Vanessa hadn't managed to throw away, and placed it on the stove. As the butter sizzled, the smell filling the air with a warmth that had been missing for years, Julian finally walked in. He looked older than his 40 years. He slumped onto a stool at the island, watching me cook. "I didn't know," he said, the excuse weak and habitual. "You chose not to know," I corrected him, flipping a sandwich. "There is a difference. You saw the bills. You saw the way she treated me. You saw the way Mia hid in her room whenever Vanessa came home. You ignored the cracks in the foundation because you didn't want the hassle of fixing them. And because of that, the roof almost caved in on your daughter." Julian flinched, his eyes darting to Mia, who was setting the table with placemats. I thought if I just gave her what she wanted, she would be happy. I thought if she was happy, we would be a family." "Vanessa is a black hole, Julian," I said, sliding a plate in front of him. "You cannot fill a black hole. You can only be consumed by it." I sat down opposite him, taking a bite of my sandwich. It was simple, unpretentious, and delicious. But we are not going to talk about her tonight. Tonight, we are going to talk about reconstruction. The trust is still frozen. The audit continues. You are going to have to work, Julian. Real work. Not just showing up at the firm to sign papers, but looking at the accounts, understanding where every dollar went. Mia looked up from her soup. "Grandpa," she took the silver set. "The one Grandma used for Thanksgiving." I paused, the sandwich halfway to my mouth. The silver set was an heirloom, passed down from Clara's mother. It wasn't just valuable, it was sacred. Vanessa had likely shoved it into a duffel bag while I was distracted. A flash of anger heat spiked in my chest, but I tamped it down. "Silver is just metal, Mia," I said, though it pained me to say it. "Memories are what matter. She can take the spoons, but she can't take the dinners we had. She can't take the laughter. We will buy new spoons. And we will make new memories. But it's not fair," Mia said, her voice trembling with the injustice of it all. She did bad things and she gets to keep the silver. She gets to keep the silver, I agreed. And she also gets to keep the fear. She gets to keep the knowledge that she is a fraud. She gets to keep the loneliness of knowing that her husband and daughter finally saw her for who she is. That is a heavy suitcase to carry, Mia. Much heavier than a box of silverware. We ate in silence for a while, the only sound a clinking of spoons against bowls. It was a fragile piece, but it was real. When dinner was over, I sent Julian to bed. He looked like he was about to collapse. Sleep in the guest room, I told him. The master bedroom, it needs to be sanitized. It needs to be cleared of her energy before you sleep there again. He nodded, grateful for the direction, and trudged upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen with Mia. We washed the dishes by hand, the warm soaky water soothing my arthritic knuckles. When we were done, I dried my hands and pulled Clara's journal from my pocket. I opened it to the page I had bookmarked earlier. Protocol 6, after the storm, check the roof. Elias, when the dust settles, the house will feel empty. It isn't. It's just waiting for you to fill it again. Don't let the silence become a ghost. Make noise. Play music. Open the windows. And check the floorboards in the library. I hid something there for a rainy day. I have a feeling you might need it when the clouds break. I smiled, feeling tears prick my eyes. Clara. Even from the grave, she was managing the estate. She was still the matriarch. Mia, I said, closing the book. Do you want to go on a treasure hunt? Her eyes lit up, the shadow of the evening lifting slightly. Now. Right now, I said. Grandma left us a clue. We walked to the library, the room where I had spent so many evenings working on blueprints while Clara read by the fire. I moved the heavy Persian rug aside, revealing the oak floorboards. I tapped them with the handle of the broom until I heard a hollow sound near the corner bookshelf. I pried the loose board up with a letter opener. Inside, nestled in the insulation, was a small, velvet-covered box. Mia gasped as I lifted it out. It wasn't jewelry. It was a stack of letters and a small, leather pouch. I opened the pouch and tipped it into my hand. Out fell a heavy, iron key. What is it for? Mia whispered. I don't know, I admitted, looking at the tag attached to the key. It read simply, the safe house. I looked at Mia, then back at the key. Vanessa had stripped the accounts. She had stolen the silver. She had tried to steal the house. But Clara had a backup plan. She always had a backup plan. It looks like, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face, that tomorrow we have a road trip to make. Vanessa thinks she left us with nothing. I have a feeling Grandma disagreed. The phone in the hallway began to ring. It was late, past 10 p.m. It shrilled aggressively, demanding attention. I knew who it was. It was Vanessa, likely calling from a hotel room, realizing that her credit cards were still frozen and she couldn't pay for the night. Or perhaps she had realized she left something behind. I looked at the phone, then at Mia. Let it ring, I said. We stood there in the library, the heart of the house, listening to the phone ring and ring until it finally stopped. The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was fortified. We had the key. We had the map. And for the first time in years, the architect was back in charge of the project. The Jaguar XJ6 is a car that demands respect. It is heavy, loud, and smells of leather and gasoline, everything Vanessa hated. She had tried to make me sell it 3 times, claiming it was an eyesore next to her leased SUVs, but I had refused. Now, as I turned the ignition and felt the engine shudder to life, the vibration felt like a heartbeat returning to a chest that had been still for too long. It was 8 a.m. The air was crisp, biting at our cheeks as we loaded the small overnight bags into the trunk. Julian stood by the passenger door, looking at the car with a strange mix of nostalgia and hesitation. He reached for the keys instinctively. "Dad, maybe I should drive? It's a long way to wherever we're going." I looked at him over the roof of the car. His eyes were shadowed with fatigue, the result of a sleepless night spent in the guest room, likely replaying the last 10 years of his life in his head. "I am 70 years old, Julian, not invalid," I said, pocketing the keys. "And I know the way. You get in a passenger seat. Your job today is to look out the window and think." He nodded, humbled, and slid into the leather seat. Mia hopped into the back, clutching the velvet box containing the letters and the iron key. She looked like an explorer on the brink of a discovery, her fear from the night before replaced by the thrill of a mission. We drove north, leaving the sprawling, manicured grounds of the Thorn Lodge behind. The further we got from the estate, the lighter the air seemed to become. We passed through small Vermont towns with white steeple churches and frozen ponds, the landscape rugged and honest. For the first hour, the only sound was the hum of the engine and the tires crunching on the salted asphalt. I didn't push Julian to talk. I let the silence do the work. Silence is a vacuum. Eventually, the truth rushes in to fill it. "I met her at a gallery opening," Julian said suddenly, not looking at me. He was staring at a passing barn, its red paint peeling in the winter sun. "Vanessa." She was so confident. She knew exactly what to say to everyone. She made me feel visible. I always felt like I was just Belias Thorne's son, the architect's shadow. But she looked at me like I was the main attraction. He let out a bitter, dry laugh. I didn't realize she was just looking at me like a mark. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands loose on the steering wheel. Creditors are excellent at mimicry, Julian. They mirror what you want to see until you invite them in. You didn't marry her because you were weak. You married her because you were hungry for validation. She just fed you poison and called it medicine. Mom never liked her, Mia piped up from the back seat. Julian turned around, surprised. "What?" "Grandma," Mia clarified. "She told me once. She said, Vanessa has sharp edges, Mia. Be careful when you hug her." I didn't know what she meant then. I do now. We drove for another 2 hours until the GPS on my phone, which I had set using the coordinates from Clara's map, told us to turn onto an unmarked gravel road. The trees here were dense, ancient pines that blocked out most of the sun. We climbed higher into the mountains, the Jaguar handling the incline with the grace of an old cat. Finally, the road opened up into a small clearing overlooking a frozen lake. And there, nestled against the tree line, was a cabin. It wasn't a grand estate. It was a modest, A-frame structure built of cedar and stone, with a wide porch facing the water. It looked remarkably like the first house Clara and I had built together 40 years ago, before the success, before the millions, before the complexity of wealth took over our lives. "I didn't know we owned this," Julian whispered, stepping out of the car. "We didn't," I said, shutting off the engine. The silence of the mountain was absolute. "Your mother bought this 15 years ago under her maiden name. She paid cash. She kept it in a separate trust that Vanessa couldn't access because it doesn't exist in the Thorne family records. She called it the sanctuary. We walked up the wooden steps. The air smelled of pine needles and wood smoke, though the chimney was cold. I took the heavy iron key from Mia. My hand trembled slightly as I fitted into the lock. It turned with a satisfying thunk. The door swung open. The inside was warm, not from heat, but from memory. It was furnished simply, overstuffed armchairs, hand-woven rugs, shelves lined with paperback books. It was a museum of the life we had before the money. On the coffee table, there was a large metal box. "Is that the treasure?" Mia asked, stepping inside reverently. "I believe so," I said. We sat on the dusty sofas. I pulled the metal box toward me. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid. Inside, there were stacks of government bonds, wrapped in elastic bands. There were gold coins. And there was a thick envelope with Julian's name on it. "This is for you," I said, handing it to him. Julian opened the envelope. His hands shook as he pulled out a letter written in Clara's familiar, looping script. He read it silently, tears streaming down his face, dripping onto the paper. "Read it aloud," I said gently. "We are all in this together now." Julian took a deep breath, his voice cracking. "My dearest Julian, if you are reading this, it means the storm I feared has finally broken. I hope I was wrong. I hope this cabin is just a dusty old relic you found while vacationing with a loving wife. But a mother knows her son, and she knows the wolves that hunt him. Vanessa loves the shine, Julian, not the metal. One day, she will try to take the shine and leave you with nothing. When that day comes, do not be afraid. This cabin is yours. The bonds in this box are yours, enough to start over, enough to build a life that is yours, not hers, not your father's. You are a good man, Julian, but you have a gentle heart in a sharp world. Use this place to heal. Listen to your father. He is tougher than he looks, but he needs you as much as you need him. Forgive yourself for the mistake of loving the wrong person. And then, build something real." Julian lowered the letter, sobbing openly now. He curled forward, burying his face in his hands. Mia moved instantly, wrapping her small arms around his shaking shoulders. I reached out and placed my hand on his head, feeling the heat of his grief. She knew, Julian choked out. She knew for years. And she didn't judge me. She just prepared. "That is what love is, Julian," I said, my own voice thick with emotion. "It isn't controlling. It's providing a safety net for the fall you hope never happens." I looked at the bonds in the box. There was easily enough here to cover the legal fees, to pay back the stolen funds if necessary, to ensure Mia's education was secure regardless of what Vanessa did to the main estate. Clara hadn't just left us money, she had left us freedom. She had neutralized Vanessa's greatest weapon, the threat of financial ruin, decades before Vanessa had even fired the first shot. "What do we do now?" Mia asked, looking up from her father's shoulder. I looked around the cabin, at the sturdy beams and the simple hearth. "Now," I said, "we light a fire. We make lunch. And then, Julian and I are going to sit down and draft a new blueprint." Vanessa thinks she is fighting a confused old man and a weak husband. She doesn't know she is fighting the entire legacy of Clara Thorne. As Julian wiped his eyes and stood up to check the fireplace, I walked to the window. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a notification from the security system at the main estate back home. Motion detected, master bedroom. I checked the camera feed. Vanessa was there. She had come back. She was tearing through the drawers, likely looking for the very bonds we were currently holding. I watched her on the small screen, a tiny, frantic figure in a silent movie. She was screaming at the empty room, throwing clothes, overturning the mattress. She looked small. She looked defeated. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt a profound sense of closure. She was searching for gold in a mine that had been tapped out years ago. I turned off the phone and turned back to my family. "Let the fire burn bright," I said to Julian. "It's going to be a cold night for those left out in the dark." The fire in the stone hearth crackled, sending sparks drifting up the chimney like wayward stars. It was a primal, comforting sound, the acoustic opposite of the scene unfolding on the small screen of my tablet. I had propped the device against a stack of firewood on the coffee table so Julian could see. We weren't watching a movie, we were watching the live feed from the security cameras at Thorn Lodge, 80 miles south. It was a silent film of destruction. Vanessa had broken a pane of glass in the French doors of the sunroom. I could see the jagged hole clearly in the night vision mode, and she was now tearing through the library. She wasn't searching methodically. She was searching with the frantic, violent energy of an animal that smells smoke but can't find the exit. Books were being pulled from shelves and hurled to the floor. Cushions were ripped open. She was destroying the very aesthetics she had claimed to value so highly, proving once and for all that her appreciation for the house was never about its beauty, but about its liquidity. Julian sat on the edge of the sofa, his hands clasped so tightly between his knees that his knuckles were white. He watched his wife, the woman he had promised to love and cherish, take a heavy brass bookend and smash the glass front of the antique curio cabinet. He didn't flinch this time. The flinching had stopped when he read Clara's letter. Now, there was only a deep, sorrowful resignation in his eyes, the look of a man watching his own house burn down and realizing he can't save the furniture, only himself. "She's looking for the bonds," he whispered, his voice rough. "She knows they have to be somewhere. She remembers you talking about liquid assets years ago. She is looking for a lifeline," I corrected him gently, taking a sip of the tea Mia had brewed. "She has realized that the credit cards are dead, the bank accounts are frozen, and her reputation is about to be shredded. She is trying to steal enough to run. But she has forgotten the most important rule of theft: never return to the scene of the crime." I picked up my phone. I didn't dial 911. That was for emergencies, and this was not an emergency. It was a foreclosure on a moral debt. I dialed the direct line for Sheriff Miller. We had played poker together every third Thursday for 20 years. He was a good man, a man who understood that the law was written in black and white but enforced in shades of gray. He answered on the second ring, his voice gruff with sleep. "Sheriff Miller," I said, my voice calm, contrasting with the violence on the screen. "This is Elias Thorne. I apologize for the late hour." "Elias?" The rustling of sheets. "Is everything all right? I saw the Jaguar leave town this morning. Thought you might be taking a trip." "I am currently at my cabin," I said. "However, my security system alerts me that there is an intruder at the lodge. Someone has forced entry through the sunroom. They are currently vandalizing the library and appear to be armed with a heavy blunt object." I paused, letting the information land. "I fear for the safety of the property. And given the intruder's erratic behavior, I fear they may be a danger to themselves." "I'm on my way," Miller said, the sleep vanishing from his tone. "I'll have a deputy meet me there. Stay on the line if you can." "I'll be watching," I said, and hung up. I didn't tell him it was Vanessa. I didn't need to. In a small town, everyone knows everything, but they pretend they don't until the paperwork is filed. If I told him it was my daughter-in-law, it would be a domestic dispute. If I reported an intruder destroying property, it was a felony in progress. I looked at Julian. She broke in, Julian. We locked the doors. She is no longer a resident, she is a trespasser. Do you understand the distinction? Julian nodded slowly. She made her choice when she picked up that rock. We watched in silence for 10 minutes. The destruction in the library was nearly complete. Vanessa had found the loose floorboard, the one I had showed Mia just the night before. She pried it up, her face twisted in a rictus of triumph that quickly curdled into scream-worthy rage when she found the hole empty. She threw the board across the room, shattering a lamp. She was screaming now, I could tell by the way her mouth contorted, though the feed was audio-free. She was cursing Clara. She was cursing me. She was cursing the empty space where she thought her salvation lay. Then, the blue lights washed over the snow outside the window. Vanessa froze. She looked toward the driveway, her chest heaving. She didn't run. She didn't try to hide. She simply slumped against the overturned desk, the fight draining out of her as the reality of her position set in. The front door, which she must have unlocked from the inside, swung open. Sheriff Miller stepped in, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom of the trashed library. He didn't draw his weapon, but his hand was resting on it. 2 deputies followed him. We watched as Miller spoke to her. Vanessa gestured wildly, pointing at the empty floorboard, then at the broken window, trying to spin a web of lies that wouldn't stick to the wreckage around her. Miller listened for a moment, then shook his head. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Julian turned his head away. He couldn't watch the metal click onto her wrists. He couldn't watch the woman he had married be led out of his father's house like a common criminal. It was a moment of profound shame, not for him, but for the memory of what they could have been. I reached out and turned off the tablet. The screen went black, leaving us with only the firelight. "It's over," I said softly. "Is it?" Julian asked, his voice trembling. "She'll make bail. She'll hire a lawyer. This is just the beginning of the fight." "No," I said, standing up and adding another log to the fire. "This was the end of the war. The rest is just cleanup." She broke into a home she had vacated. She destroyed property valued well over the felony limit. She was caught red-handed by the sheriff. There is no spin doctor in the world who can fix that, Julian. Her credibility is gone. And without credibility, Vanessa has no power. Mia, who had fallen asleep on the armchair wrapped in a quilt, stirred and opened her eyes. "Did the bad guys go away, Grandpa?" she asked sleepily. I walked over and smoothed her hair. "Yes, sweetheart. The sheriff came. The house is safe." "Good," she murmured, closing her eyes again. "Grandma said the house always wins." I looked at Julian, a small smile playing on my lips. "She did say that, didn't she?" Julian managed a weak smile in return. "She said a lot of things I should have listened to." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the frozen lake, the moonlight reflecting off the ice. "Dad, I don't know how to apologize. For the last 3 years. For the money. For letting her push you out." "Don't apologize," I said, coming to stand beside him. "Apologies are words. I prefer blueprints." You want to make it right. You help me rebuild. We have a lot of damage to repair at the lodge. The library is a mess. The finances are a wreck. And your daughter needs a father who is present, not just physically, but emotionally. I can do that, Julian said, and for the first time in a decade, I believed him. I want to do that. I don't want that to shine anymore, Dad. I just want the foundation. Then we start tomorrow, I said. We'll stay here for a few days. Let the lawyers handle the arraignment. Let the gossip mill in town churn itself out. We will sit by this fire, we will eat simple food, and we will remember who we were before Vanessa Thorne decided to decorate our lives. I put my hand on his shoulder, feeling the tension finally leaving his frame. The parasite had been excised. The wound was deep, and it would leave a scar, but scars are just proof that you survived something that tried to kill you. And as I looked at my son and granddaughter, safe in the cabin Clara had built for this exact moment, I knew that we would not just survive. We would stand.